Part 21, Chapter 55. I'm getting something, Gil reported. Thank God, said Julie. Is it Hoban? Stan asked. Yes, I think it is. Stan swung around in his big command chair and took the microphone from Gil's hand. Hoban, what's going on there? Sorry for the delay in transmission, sir, Hoban said, his voice echoing eerily around the lander's cabin. We've had a revolt on board. It's in hand now, but a group of crewmen have seized a pod and are on their way to the surface. Nothing much they can do to us, Stan said. Listen, Captain, something really important has happened here. We've lost Norbert. Your robot alien. I'm sorry to hear it, sir, though I was never that fond of him. At least he died doing what he was built to do, Stan said. What about the dog? Hoban asked. Yes, the dog's gone too, Stan said brusquely. Why is everyone so upset about the dog? The dog's not important. We've got troubles of our own. There was no reaction to that. Stan cleared his throat and wondered how soon he could take another ampule. Then he brought his attention back to present matters. Captain Hoban, we found what we were looking for. The beekeepers have done our job for us. Norbert took over a biofarm harvester ship. It's packed full of royal jelly. We're rich, Captain. Yes, sir. If we can just get out of here now. Can you get up to our orbit? Negative, Stan said. We're still in the lander, which is barely maneuverable in this weather. Taking shelter in the harvester is our best bet, but it's going to take some doing to get there. Yes, sir, Hoban said. I copy. Secondly, preliminary visual inspection shows the flight controls of the harvester were badly damaged in the fighting. I doubt it'll fly, but it will provide more refuge than the lander. You'll have to come down to us. Yes, sir, Hoban said without enthusiasm. What about the volunteers? We've lost touch with them, Stan answered. As soon as we get ourselves out of here, they will be our first order of business. Hoban didn't like it, but it didn't seem the time or the place to voice a disagreement. It ought to be simple enough, Stan said. What you need to do, as soon as the weather situation stabilizes a little, is send the backup lander down here to pick us up. Our situation here is none too stable. We can't send the backup lander, Hoban said. I told you, sir, Badger and his men took it. Can you maneuver at all in your lander, Dr. Myakovsky? I don't know, Stan said. They weren't made for that sort of thing, and the weather down here is getting pretty severe. It's a major storm, Captain Hoban told him. The worst of it is heading your way. Damn! Stan spat. You can't maneuver the Dolomite to pick us up, can you? Not in this weather. None of us would stand a chance. All right. Stan paused. Just a minute. Let me think. It was then that the storm front burst in all its fury upon the lander and the unprotected splinter of land it rested upon. Despite its weight, the lander was rocked to its foundations. The earth beneath it rippled and swayed. Lights went out and were replaced by the dull red glow of emergency lighting. Julie screamed as another motion of the storm shot her legs out from under her. Gil caught her before she was slammed into a support. "Into the pod!" Stan shouted, referring to the small escape vehicle that the lander carried. "Gil, get in there and power up!" Gil paused for a moment, looking at the 5-point steel door separating them from the lander's rear compartment. "Maybe I should stay and try to help the crew." "They don't have a chance," Stan said. "We need your help to keep us alive. Now move!" The three of them, Stan, Gil, and Julie, struggled back to the pod and during a brief lull, got in. Stan slammed home the hatch and Julie dogged it into the place. Gil waited until they were all strapped in, then blew open the lander's exit doors. The storm swept in. Gil took the pod out under full acceleration. There was a moment of intoxicating freedom as the pod pulled away from the ship. Then the full fury of the storm caught the little craft. Stan just had time to secure himself into a command chair by magnetic clamps. Then the pod was launched into the air like a rocket from a launcher. As it turned, Stan could see the land beneath the lander collapse, throwing the vehicle into a deep pit that suddenly yawned beneath it. Glancing around, he saw that Julie was secured on a deceleration couch. A moment later, the internal lighting went out. The storm blazed at the pod's windows. There were long, stunning lines of force, outlined by a driving rain lashing in at them. The pod spun around, its automatic stabilizers working hard to keep it on an even keel. The ground came up sickeningly below them, and the pod's jets blazed, avoiding the collision. They were airborne, and the sky through which they tore was colored ochre and purple. It was a world without stability, a place where titanic forces battled as though it were the beginning of time. "Can't you get her down, Gil?" Stan called out above the deafening clatter. "I am trying, Doctor," Gil said, busy over the controls. "You can do it, Gil!" Julie cried. "We hope," Stan said. Gil's long fingers played across the controls. The pod seemed to flutter and skitter like a crazed bat in the luridly lit space between the harsh ground below and the beetling thunderheads above. The little craft spun like a leaf driven by a storm. Julie had to shut her eyes tightly to control the vertigo and nausea that racked her as the pod trembled and shook and rattled like a riveting machine gone berserk. For Stan, the pain was almost unbearable as his tortured lungs strove to replace the air that the violent motions of the storm were driving out of him. He had never known such pain. And yet, paradoxically, he was also experiencing a moment of great exhilaration, a feeling of himself as a conquistador of the new age, persevering through pain and hardship as a new world and new opportunities came into sight. Yes, he thought, it has all been worth it. The pain reminds me that I'm alive. This is the way to go. But I do wish it would stop. And then, abruptly, they entered a space of quiet air, and Gil was able to maneuver the controls. Suddenly, the pod dropped 30 feet and hovered for a moment on its jets, bare inches above the ground. Then, with an almost grudging sigh, as though the insensate machine had enjoyed its experience of being airborne in the midst of fury, it settled to the ground. Gil set the clamping system that secured the ship to the bedrock it had settled upon. He said, "Last stop, Grand Central Station. All passengers, please prepare to detrain." Stan unbuckled himself shakily. "Why, Gil, I didn't know you had a sense of humor." "I don't," Gil said. "My words were for the purpose of helping you and the others keep your spirits up." "Commendable," Stan said. He closed his eyes for a moment, enjoying the blessed relief of relative silence and no motion. Then he asked, "Everyone okay? Then let's take stock." Chapter 56. Red Badger and his people sat together on the semicircular couches that almost filled the main section of the pod. Red had remembered to bring aboard a carton of emergency rations, each in a self-heating aluminoplex container. He passed these around now. Walter Glint had a half-full canteen of raisin wine he'd brewed himself in the ship's locker room, before the hypersleep procedure, using copper tubing he'd liberated from the heat circulation system. He passed around the brew, and Min Dwin came up with some narco-smoke cigarettes. In a little while, they were quite a cheerful bunch. If only they'd been able to raise some dance music. It was one hell of a party shaping up. Badger liked to party as well as anyone, but the unfamiliar duties of command distracted him from really letting go. He turned to the little all-wave radio receiver tucked away in one of the pod's storage compartments. He needed to keep his people content, because he was counting on them to see him safely through this. Although he wouldn't let on to the others, Badger was more than a little disturbed by how things had gone so far. He had counted on seizing the Dolomite in his first attempt, when surprise had been in his favor. Back then, taking the initiative had seemed the thing to do. That was not how matters had worked out, however. Now they were alone, isolated on a savage planet that favored no life except alien. Badger had been thinking furiously, trying to find a way to wrest victory from the jaws of defeat. Then he thought he had it. He set the sweep alarm on the radio to wide scanning and began searching the radio waves. It required no master radio operator to find a signal in a place as barren of radio activity as this one. Red locked onto the signal and began transmitting. Chapter 57. Adams, the Lancet's radio operator, was a tall, gangling youth with red hair and a prominent Adam's apple. He came into the main control room without knocking, because Captain Potter had posted standing orders that messages of urgency were to be transmitted at once, and without the usual protocol that prevailed on the interstellar ships. "Yes, what is it?" Potter snapped. The captain was tall and strongly constructed. His features were handsome and coarse, from the big knife of a nose to the heavy tufted eyebrows that gave his face a sinister character. He wore a midnight blue uniform with gold flash marks on the sleeves, showing his years of service in the Interspace Mariners Association. His voice was low-pitched, harsh and resonant, The sort of voice you paid attention to the first time you heard it. "Radio signal, sir," Adams said. "Is it from the people on the harvester?" "No, sir. We still haven't been able to establish contact with them. Their radio doesn't respond. I don't think it looks good, sir." "Nobody gives a damn what you think," Potter said, his voice dropping to a sawmill rasp. "Who's the message from?" "A man who calls himself Red Badger," Adams said. "He says he's a crewman from the Dolomite." "Dolomite? Never heard of it. What location did they give?" "They're descending to the surface of AR-32, sir." Potter stared at the crewman, eyes narrowed, dark brows creased. "That's quite impossible," he said at last. "This planet is our exclusive preserve." Adams was about to reply, but perceived, just in time, that Potter was talking aloud to himself. "I'll speak to him," Potter said. "Put it through for me." Adams went to the console and made the necessary adjustments. Badger's voice came through on the loudspeaker. "Captain Potter. Sir, this is Crewman Badger from the ship Dolomite. Sir, a situation has arisen which I would like to acquaint you with." "Go ahead," Potter said, and listened carefully as Badger told about the revolt he had led on the Dolomite. "We didn't think it was fair, sir. Captain Hoban taking us into an area that was under the exclusive control of Biofarm. The men asked me to speak for them. I talked with Captain Hoban, sir, in fair and reasonable terms, asking him to get a ruling from Biofarm before taking us into this area. Can't say more reasonable than that, can I, sir? But Captain Hoban didn't see it that way. He ordered me and my men put into irons and held to face criminal charges back on Earth. We didn't agree. There was a fight and me and some of the men came down to the planet." "You're on the surface of AR-32 now?" Potter asked. "Yes, sir, and we're not the only ones. There's a Dr Myakovsky down here too, in his own pod, sir. He's come to this place to steal your royal jelly. He and Hoban are the criminals, and they want to put us on charges." "That's very interesting," Potter said. "Do you happen to have their exact location?" "I'm afraid not, sir, since me and my mates had to leave the ship in a hurry, so to speak. But I'll bet anything they're heading for the hive, where they sent that robot of theirs." "What robot are you referring to?" "The one they call Norbert. Looks just like an alien, sir, only it's not a real one. There's a law against that, isn't there? The damn thing already killed some of my shipmates." "There's a law against it, all right," Potter muttered. "My law, if no other." "Beg pardon, sir?" "Never mind. What is this robot supposed to do?" "Collect royal jelly, sir, and leave an electronic trail showing Myakovsky where to go." "Damn it!" Potter sputtered. "They could get what they came for and be out of here before we could stop them." "No, sir," Badger said. "I've heard them talking to Captain Hoban on the radio. They plan to get through the hive by following an electronic signal that their robot is supposed to lay down for them. But if me and my mates was to wipe out that electronic trail..." I like the idea of that, Potter said slowly. Can you do it? You would be rendering me a valuable service. Indeed we can, sir. We're hoping it'll be taken into consideration when you pick us up. You are going to rescue us, aren't you, sir? You can count on it, Potter said. There could be a reward in this for you. Does that sound good, Mr. Badger? Get in there and wipe out that trail. Then come to coordinates 546Y by 23X. We'll rendezvous with you there. You men will be rewarded for your good work. Thank you, sir. You'll be hearing from us soon. The transmission ended. Potter turned to Adams. Well, what are you standing around for? Get back to the radio room. And not a word of this to the crew, or I'll have your hide. Yes, sir. Adams saluted smartly and backed out of the room. Potter waited until he was gone, then looked around the control room. The only ones present were his chief engineering officer, Ollins, and the helmsman, Driscoll. Driscoll! Potter snapped. Sir, you've heard nothing of this. No, sir. You can take a break now, mister. Ollins and I will finish out your watch. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Driscoll saluted and left the control room. Lieutenant Ollins was a grizzled old veteran of many space flights who had served with Potter before. In fact, the two men came from the same town in Tennessee. Ollins relaxed when Driscoll was away from the control room. Potter afforded him great privileges when none of the men were around. When they were, it was spit and polish and punctilio all the way, because that was the sort of man Potter was. Well, Tom, Potter said, seems we've got a bit of a situation on our hands. Seems so, sir, Ollins said. But unless I miss my guess. Yes, go ahead, Tom. Unless I miss my guess, sir, you've thought up an interesting way to take care of it. Potter permitted himself a smile. I don't know if I'd say interesting, Mr. Ollins, but thorough. Yes, I think you'll find my way very thorough.